The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the 13th episode of the Centresteer Podcast from wonderful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we're centered and headquartered. It's a lovely, sunny, late April spring day. I'm John Costage, your host, and I want to thank everyone for listening and joining us. If you have any comments or questions about the podcast or want to give us some feedback, please go to our website, centresteer.com, and there's a contact page, and that's spelled in the British fashion, C-E-N-T-R-E, steer.com. Joining me today is a special guest, Steve Bland, and we'll get to him in a moment. But joining us, as usual, to my left.
I'm Harold. I'm a professional technician and a certified Land Rover addict.
I'm Dave Carroll, and I am just a Land Rover junkie.
Mark Garcia, and I have a recently deceased D2.
And I'm Morgan Aldridge. I'm from Vermont, and I've got a Series 3 88 that now that it's thawed out, I should be able to dust it off and start working on it again.
Well, I'm Steve. I'm from the UK, and I have a Defender 110 that's, hopefully going to make it around Norway and back.
And which brings us right to you and as our special guest this month. So you are taking your 110 from your hometown to the Arctic Circle. Can you walk through a little bit of that journey? What are you driving? And then we'll ask you some questions and see how it goes from there.
Sure. Okay, so basically on Friday, I've actually planned it that I'm leaving work on Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I like the precision.
Yeah, absolutely. Picking up a ferry from Dover across to Dunkirk, then literally driving as flat out as I can to make it through France, Belgium, Amsterdam, Denmark, Sweden, into Norway, and hopefully in the Arctic Circle in time for my birthday on the 22nd of May. Then after that, I make it all the way back through all the fjords, follow the Atlantic Highway for the short period that it is, and make off a few stops all the way around, and then back again through Europe, back home. Should be a 3-week journey in total. It works out about 4,000 miles, something along those lines. Wow. So, all good.
I guess it's not as direct as you might think. Latitude-wise, it doesn't seem like much of a trip, but when you have to go around like that on the continent, it does add up to miles.
Yeah. There is no ferry from the UK to Norway anymore. There used to be, but that got abandoned some time ago. I can be on a ferry for 18 hours to Denmark, but I really didn't fancy that. So I'd rather be in the car on the road.
Absolutely. So what year, make, and model of 110 are you taking?
It's a 1990 Safari County station wagon. It's the 200 TDI with 230,000 miles on the clock. I believe it's the original engine in it still.
So it's just broken in then?
Yeah, pretty much. It starts on a button every time, no issues. It hasn't
as all
had
TDIs do.
Yeah. No major modifications to it or anything like that. I'm just kitting out the back. Basically, I've removed the rear row of seats to fit a bed in. And that's about it, really. Not many other modifications, just a few uprated track rods, that type of thing, steering guard, but nothing major.
Now, are you a tall gentleman?
5'9".
Oh, so you'll fit then with plenty of room.
Yeah, it's a neat fit, I would say. I'm not tall. I'm a little bit wider than I should be, but it's quite a neat fit.
As long as there aren't two of you, it should be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's just one of me.
So you are traveling alone.
I am.
That sounds okay. In fact, I'm planning a trip myself in 2017 when I turn 50, and I plan to drive across the United States and into Canada. And I'm planning generally to travel alone too. But I don't know. I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know. I'm not sure what the question
I
is
mean,
there.
I prefer to travel alone at times. I think it's you get to do what you want to do, and you don't have to compromise with anyone else.
That's rules to live by, Steve.
Yeah.
You can also make up whatever stories you want when you return.
Yeah, it will be amazing. When I come back, I will have fought polar bears and everything, even though they don't have polar bears in Norway, but nobody knows that.
And no one can prove that you didn't.
No, that's very true.
Are you taking pictures or video?
I have a GoPro that's going to be on the windscreen. I will be taking pictures. I'm potentially thinking about having a blog while I'm out there, just to keep people at home up to date with what's going on, but it'll definitely be on Twitter. Yeah, so there will be video, there will be photos. There's a road called the Trolls Highway. It's Trollstigen. And it's an awesome road that I was going to ride on a motorbike, but I've decided to go by Land Rover instead. But these roads are just phenomenal regarding all the passes and the kind of winding lanes up and down mountains, that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot to video and hopefully photograph while I'm there.
Well, you know, this Centresteer Twitter stream does follow you. That's how you and I got to know each other.
Yep.
So when you push out a blog or pictures, I'll make sure to retweet you and push that back out. But that'll be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing all that. So how did this come up? What possessed you to go to the Arctic Circle, and why a Land Rover 110?
It was originally going to be by motorbike, but I had a motorbike accident, which broke a leg. And I decided it would probably be better to do it in another vehicle. So Land Rover was one of the options. It was one of those things, I was talking it over with a few people about what car to get and things like that. And it was actually my sister that said, well, why don't you get a Land Rover Defender? Because, you can do what you like with it, and you can just customize it, change it, do whatever you want, fix it easily yourself. And then if anything does go wrong, you know that you're able to sort it out. So that was that really. That was about a year ago. And I wanted a 110 purely for this kind of thing. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have it available for sleeping and so on and so forth. And a 90 just wouldn't cut it too well. So it was a 110. Saw this one, actually picked it up on eBay, and the rest is history, I guess. It is my first Land Rover. I'd had Vauxhall Frontieras. I think they might have been called Amigos or something like that in the US. But I'd had a couple of
Chevy Trackers, maybe. I think they were Chevy Trackers.
Possibly.
Amigos were bigger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not sure, but I've had a couple of those in the past, which I loved. But the Land Rover called to me, and so I bought it.
Nice. So you were not a Land Rover person before, but this just kind of possessed you to become the Land Rover person you are now.
Well, I hadn't had a Land Rover before. I had been green laning. I actually had an off-road course in a Land Rover, in a Defender as well. Bit of green laning in a Series 2 when I was very much younger. But I'd never owned one. So always wanted, but hadn't owned one. They hold their price really well. And so therefore you struggle to get a good value one. Let's put it that way. They still cost a lot, even 20 years old. They still cost a lot.
Come over here and find out what they cost.
Yeah. So no, I wasn't originally, but now definitely am.
So and why the Arctic Circle of all places?
It's probably the closest kind of extreme place I could get to, just to see how things are. I prefer cold climates to hot climates, and I'd seen a few different things on TV. over the past few years. The TV program Top Gear, they went up into the Arctic and the North Pole and things like that. Although I'm not doing anything quite that drastic.
Nor do you have the support staff.
But no. It was just a place that I wanted to go to. I mean, for me, it's very much like the UK climate, just a bit colder. And so it wasn't a great stretch away, and it wasn't that much different to being at home, I guess, for a first time. This is the first time I've actually gone for this length of time anywhere. I've had a few weekend breaks and things like that, but 3 weeks on my own, expecting not to have any kind of support or anything like that. This was felt like a comfortable place to go to before I head off anywhere else, like towards Morocco or anything like that.
So you mentioned the Atlantic Highway. What is that? I never heard of the Atlantic Highway before.
You've never heard of it. Basically, it's only short. It's a highway that stretches across small islands. It's only about 10 kilometres long, but it literally just hops island to island to island. And if you Google Norway and the Atlantic Highway, you will get plenty of pictures of it. But it's in effect straight across all the islands, and it just looks really awesome.
Wow! I just did what you said.
Uh-huh.
Oh my!
Yeah. You've probably there's iconic pictures. You probably might be looking at one where there's the waves crashing over the actual bridge.
Wow!
Yeah.
I'm showing everybody in the room. It's an outrageous photo.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
That's an impressive water crossing.
Listeners, you need to just type in Norway Atlantic Highway, and you will see this amazing photo of a curved bridge that's going from island to island, and then there's this giant wave crashing in. It's just, and there's a car on it too. Unbelievable! That road looks amazing.
Yeah,
that is very impressive.
So there's that one, and there's also Trollstigen, which is one of the mountain roads. And again, if you Googled that, TROLLSTIGEN.
Hold on, I'm
then
not that fast.
Yeah.
What is it now? TRO?
LLSTIGEN.
I see it now.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Talk about switchbacks.
Yes.
That's impressive.
So there's a few roads like that that have really appealed to me. That I want to go and travel. Hence the reason for the GoPro, because if I can't get the photo of it, then I'll get as much video footage of it as I can while I'm traveling on them. I
want you to know that I pulled up the photo of the Norway Trollstigen, if I said that correctly, and everybody's mouth just dropped here in the room. It was like unbelievable.
I'm trying to figure out how you're going to get a 110 to go around those switchbacks without three-pointing it.
We'll find out soon enough.
I think you should, not only do you need a GoPro, you need to have a drone, so the drone can be out remote and watch you as you do the switchbacks.
Yeah. See, one of the things I was thinking about was how do I get to have the GoPro on a tripod somewhere watching what I'm doing without any fear of it going missing or getting lost or stolen or anything like that. But that would be something that I would definitely try to do while I'm there. So it'd be literally set it up, go down the road, and then whilst it's filming, and then come back and pick it back up again.
Right.
Just to see. Because I think it would be amazing.
Well, absolutely. I'm already looking forward to seeing the footage, because I do some video footage of our travels, and I know what that's like. That's pretty fun stuff. Have you done that before? Have you taken video of your journeys?
I have, but never published anything. Well, apart from one ford where I took the 110 through a ford on a local green lane. Green lanes here, basically we have unpaved roads, and they're called green lanes. So we literally go green laning, which is off-road, but they are public highways.
Right.
On one green lane, there is a ford. So I've only got one video of that, and that's the only thing that I've published. But I do have a few others, but they're not of any interest to anyone.
So what are you packing into your 110 that you're taking with you? What do you plan to sleep in it? Do you plan to eat out of it? Are you going to camp? What's the kit?
Yeah, I have basically a plywood bed base set up in there, very basically off the wheel arch. There's a couple of cushions going in that are being made just as a sleeping base, really. Other than that, I'll be packing some food, clothes. I have a split charge relay and leisure battery system set up in there. And I'll have an inverter with me as well, just so I can charge laptops and things along those lines as well.
Solar panels?
Pardon?
Solar panels?
No,
that's
just
my
all
big
running
thing.
off the alternator. There's not going to be enough sun, really, to really work with solar panels. We don't get that much over this side. Solar panels aren't great.
You can charge off the alternator when you're on the go anyway.
Yeah, and that's the plan.
Are you taking tools or spare parts?
I have the toolkit that I normally use, which is basically a full socket set and club hammer, the necessary things.
British adjustment tool number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have all that normal kind of thing. I'll be taking a small axe, shovel, all that kind of thing, just in case. Spare parts are going to be a few basic things, really. Maybe brake pads, because as you've seen the roads, I may wear 1 or 2 pairs out.
You may.
So I'm going to take brake pads with me, a couple of belts, that kind of thing. But I've driven this now for a year. I've already done about 10 to 12,000 miles in it. And touch wood, it's been running fine. I've had no issues. So the reliability is really high. All the timing belt and all that, timing belt and tensioners and oil seals have all been changed recently. So hopefully I'm not going to meet too many problems. I might take some oil though.
Smart.
Yeah, cause I think it does leave a trail. Let's say.
What's the population density, I suppose, of where you're going? At what point do you leave civilization?
In the south of Norway is generally okay. As you get up towards the Arctic Circle, I wouldn't expect to see much every 100 miles, something like that. Then there should be some kind of civilization, but there's really, it's not a lot, but there are regular fuel stops. But I'll be taking a little bit extra fuel with me on the roof. It is quite regular, and they're actually quite well set up in the fact that they have petrol station or diesel pumps on the side of the road that you just pay by card. So they're unmanned, and you can just pay as you go past them, which is really useful. Don't know how many of them there are, but
didn't know that.
there'll be enough. Yeah.
Well, the Arctic, do you have a sense of how far the Arctic Circle is from quote-unquote civilization? Like, how long will you be on your own or away from emergency services or even, what we would call AAA, I guess you call the AA and the RAC?
Yeah, not far.
That's good.
Not far at all. I think maybe 50 miles from the nearest town, really, ever.
Just enough to get hurt and know that and know that you need to survive the night.
Yeah. In effect, it's surprising. It sounds very exotic when you tell people you go into the Arctic Circle. It sounds very exotic, and it sounds like there's not going to be anyone around. But the reality of it is, there's hundreds of miles even further north that are well populated. So that there's not really an issue. For the Norwegians, the Arctic Circle is, their neighbourhood. It's next door to them. So they're populated all the way up to the north of Norway, where they have the midnight sun, and they're currently coming out of the winter, so they're starting to get some daylight now.
So just to reiterate, you're leaving. You're going to be there for 3 months, roughly. Your trip's going to be 3 months, and you're leaving when?
Only 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Leaving on the 16th of May. Should be back around about the 8th or 9th of June.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I mean, it looks like an absolutely beautiful drive.
Those roads, that Atlantic Highway alone.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There might only be about 3 or 4 different places of huge interest, but I just can't wait to see. I've looked at some webcams recently in the past couple of days of some of the roads that I'm taking, and there's still about 4 to 5 feet of snow on either side of the road, but the roads are completely clear. So, I'm feeling quite safe about going there, but it's still going to be pretty awesome. Bearing in mind they only opened one of the mountain roads yesterday after the winter, and it's still closed overnight. So there are it's still winter time there, and it's just kind of coming out of winter now, and it's something I'm really looking forward to. Really looking forward to it.
Brings up a good point that all these photos of the Trollstigen on Google are clearly not a bit of snow on the ground at all. Beautiful and green. Doing it with snow on the ground, that's a whole nother game.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be a lot there by the time I get there. They've had it quite mild, same as the UK has this year. But there may be some, but we'll see.
I got to say,
cool.
It would be very impressive to do it on a motorbike, but at the same time, I think expeditionary prudence would be to take the 110.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah. There is a chap, there's an English chap who's doing, by the looks of things, a very similar journey to me. He leaves a week after, and he's doing it on a motorbike. And that would be amazing. But, I don't envy him at all. Not at this time of year.
No.
Well, I think anytime anybody's able to undertake an expedition of this length, that it's absolutely spectacular. If you can have a goal of getting someplace that's really interesting, like the Arctic Circle, that just makes it spectacular. I'd love to be able to do a trip like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking we could do a trip up through Canada, but it just doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Well, it would if we understood Canada better. I think as Americans, we don't. There's some really cool stuff, especially if you go up towards Halifax and you go further up into Quebec. There's some really neat stuff up that way.
Absolutely, there's some neat stuff, but somehow
very
Canada
cool.
just doesn't seem as exotic to us.
That's true. It doesn't have the ring to it. You're right, I guess.
You never hear the phrase the Canadian expedition or anything like that.
I guess that's true.
So I'm sure it would be very cool. It just doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
So, Steve, are you going to get to Trondheim? I'm trying to figure out,
Yes.
looking at the mapping here.
I will be. I'm just going to grab my map as well, so I can give you a bit of pointers. I will be. Sorry, just bear with me.
No, you're fine.
Do I hear a paper map?
You do hear a paper map, indeed.
Excellent.
Yep.
Far more reliable than the other kind.
Batteries never run out on a
That's
paper
right.
map.
That's very true. I will be going as far up as a place called Bodo, B-O-D, and it's O with a slash through it. That's probably as north as I'll get. But yes, then I'll be... Trondheim is Trondheim's slightly south of that. So if you go north from Trondheim, then you'll see Mo i Rana, and that's just below the Arctic Circle, and then Bodo is just above that. You have to excuse my pronunciation because I'm English. I don't need to pronounce foreign.
We're Americans. We don't have to pronounce anything.
Names, Sally. So Yeah,
I see Bodo, or however you say that.
Yes.
BOD with the computer zero.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yes.
BOD 0.
BOD 0. So just showing everybody there's Bodo, BODO with a 0. That's up there, man. That is. So what about wildlife? Are you prepared for? I assume there's no polar bears, but I have to ask: are there polar bears?
No. Wildlife, I think, is mainly deer.
I think they'd have reindeer and maybe a moose.
Yeah. Is Norway considered Lapland?
Reindeer.
I never understood the British term Lapland. Exactly, that's?
It kind of, I guess it is. When you start getting into very northern areas, kind of up in Finland and Iceland and, up there, then that's when we start talking about Lapland. So I guess...
Far north, you can't see where the lines are.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Lapland is really just where Santa comes from. So it's not so much a region as just an area of fantasy, I guess. You go to Lapland, but it's not a literal region. It's just the rough northern area, really.
I'm looking at the map, and where you're going is up in the Greenland, way north in the Northwest Passage, past north of Hudson Bay for Canada. So that's, for our comparison, that's way up there.
Mm.
Well, 23 degrees short of the pole.
Yeah.
2/3 of the way to the pole.
Joining us now is Jeff Aronson of Rovers North magazine, actually called Rovers magazine, right, Jeff?
Yes, it is.
So thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you in a minute, so you have to hold on. And and then we're going to finish up with Steve, and then we'll talk to Jeff for a bit. You're headed to Norway in a 1990 Defender 110 200 TDI by yourself, traveling from where in the UK to the Arctic Circle? I never did catch where you were leaving from.
It's right in the middle. It's a county called Bedfordshire and a little village in that county called Aronson that nobody's ever heard of.
That's okay. Is that near Norwich? Is that in that vicinity?
In comparison to London, no.
Oh, okay. I tried. Come on, man. Help a brother out.
Well, let's put this in perspective. Where are you in relation to Solihull?
Okay. If you took a line from Norwich and went across the map, and you took a line from Solihull and you went down the map, you could possibly intersect roughly where I am.
Good. That works.
Yeah.
Looks like it's very much stock 110, right, Steve?
Pretty much, yeah. The nothing, no lifts on it, no engine modifications, no change of gearbox. It is pretty stock, rust included. It's one of the things I'm really not worried about the bad weather because the rain just goes straight through it. So as far as I'm concerned, it's waterproof.
Self-draining.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So I'm not worried about that. But yeah, the only differences are, like I was saying at the beginning, uprated some of the track rods, put a steering guard on it, and that's it, really.
Have you mounted a winch or anything like that?
No.
Have you considered a winch?
I've considered it, but not for this journey.
You don't think you'll get stuck?
You'll pretty much be on road, right?
I suppose.
Yeah.
Or green lane.
And that's the thing. I'm going at a time of year where roads are starting to open again. And the Norwegians are very good at keeping the roads clear of snow because they have to. Their biggest, believe it or not, their biggest ecological issue is the amount of salt they use on the roads to keep them clear. They use thousands and thousands of tons per year. So I'm not concerned about the roads, really. And if I do get stuck, then I'll get stuck.
Are you plugged into any Land Rover club? I know there's some in the UK, but are there maybe some in Norway or something you've plugged into to let them know you're cruising through?
I haven't, no. I have European breakdown cover, just in case. But no, haven't been in contact with anyone over there, to be honest.
Well, maybe our half dozen listeners will. Maybe one of them will be in Norway.
Yeah, maybe. It's pretty much just a road trip, really, and that's how I'm viewing it at the moment. If I hit any difficulties, then I'll be sure to let you know.
Well, I'm certainly suitably impressed because, as you know, I'm planning my own, and just the mere fact that you're going to travel 4,000 miles by yourself in a standard shift vehicle that doesn't probably go more than 65 miles an hour. That's, although admittedly some really cool roads.
A 25-year-old vehicle.
Yeah.
It's just, as you said, it's just broken in.
Yeah.
It's the only way to travel. What kind of mileage you get, by the way?
About 24 to 26 miles per gallon.
That's spectacular.
Not bad.
That's actually really good. Although, are those...
That's imperial gallons.
Those are imperial
right?
gallons? Yeah.
English gallons.
Yeah, so maybe about 20 to 22 of our gallons.
Because aren't they're smaller or bigger than ours?
Their gallons are bigger than ours, so that you get more mileage out of them.
Steve, this is Jeff speaking from the U.S. Hi there. Will you be camping throughout your trip or staying in hostels or in luxury?
The plan is to stay in the back of the vehicle, mostly. What I will do every 2 or 3 days is just pull into a campsite somewhere just for basic, kind of clean up or something along those lines. But in general, it's going to be camp where I stop.
Excellent. And because many of us in the U.S. have only contemplated trips of that length, always curious, with a 200 TDI, what are the tools that you would pack as roadside tools to just get you to the nearest repair shop if needed?
I've got a club hammer and basically an all-ranging socket set. I've got cable for in case anything goes wrong with the electrics, fuses. I will be taking a grinder and a electric drill, a battery-powered electric drill with me just in case, because you never know. But it's just basic hand tools, really. I mean, for a 200 TDI, that there isn't much else you can take. It's as basic as you get, really.
Yes,
the only specialized tool for a 200 TDI would be the timing set if you needed to change the timing belt.
Yeah, and that would be it.
In the U.S., at least in some parts of the U.S., diesel fuel is harder to get and harder to keep in good, clean, water-free condition. Do you carry filters, or is that not necessary on a TDI?
There are filters on it. In Europe, we don't have an issue with diesel or anything like that. It's fairly standard. We have our European standards, so everything is the same across the whole of the continent. All the petrol and the diesel standards are set, and the way that people have to keep them and maintain pumps and so on and so forth. So there's not any major issues in Europe related to fuel.
From what I understand, the fuel quality over there is consistently better than it is here. Here it can be kind of a crapshoot.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, the standard fuel filter on the TDIs does have a water drain in it.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, there you go. Very well. And have you ever considered, just as sort of an all-purpose tool and recovery item, a high lift or a farm jack?
I have that on the back.
Excellent. You're all set.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, you're going to hopefully keep us in contact during your journey, and I'll throw this out. Might you want to Skype in with us from somewhere on the trip, and even if it's just you and me talking, to record a little bit for the next podcast?
If I can, I will.
And we'd certainly like to hear from you when you're done and you're back too.
Yeah, that I'll definitely do.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, great talking with you. This sounds really cool. I'm excited. We want you to keep in contact, and you're welcome to stay and continue to join us on the podcast if you like, or you can, go back to your regular life.
Thanks. No, I'll wait around.
Oh, wonderful. Feel free to chime in. All right, we'll take a break, and we'll come back, and we'll talk to Jeff. Heralds and Word.
For many of us, this past winter has been especially long and harsh. I, for one, was beginning to think that spring would never arrive, but now it seems that spring is finally here. Better late than never, I guess. Now that spring has finally sprung, our thoughts are turning to summer vacations and lots of events and activities that will involve extra driving. Now is the time to give your ride some extra attention to make sure it's ready for a full season of road trips and off-road excursions, if that's your thing. Some people think that all there is to maintenance is changing the engine oil. In reality, that's just the beginning, but it is a good place to start. Winter is hard on engine oil, so it's a good idea to change the oil and the oil filter and start the season fresh. The summer heat puts extreme demands on the cooling system, so you'll want to make sure it's in tip-top condition. Start by examining the external parts of the cooling system. Make sure the outside of the radiator is clean and that the fins aren't blocked with mud, leaves, or other debris. Carefully examine all of the hoses and belts. Replace any that show signs of wear or leakage, as well as any that look dried out or cracked. Now let's look at the coolant. If it looks dirty or oily or milky or cloudy, it would be a good idea to flush the cooling system and refill with fresh coolant. The additives in the coolant don't last forever, and when depleted, your engine will be at risk for corrosion damage and diminished cooling performance. If your coolant is more than a few years old, it's probably time to change it. You can buy coolant that's premixed and ready to use, or you can save some money if you buy it full strength and mix it 50-50 with distilled water. Make sure you only use pure distilled water. Never add tap water to the coolant. No matter how clean you think it is, tap water contains trace amounts of minerals and chemicals, and these impurities will shorten the life of the coolant and could possibly cause damage. Do yourself a favor and spend the 99 cents and keep a gallon of distilled water on hand, just in case. While you're under the hood, take a few minutes to check other fluid systems. If you don't know where to find them, your owner's manual can help. Check the power steering system, including all the lines and hoses for signs of leakage. If you need to add fluid, make sure to use the correct type for your vehicle. Again, the manual can help here. Check the brake fluid level, and again check the lines and flexible hoses under the vehicle for signs of damage or leaks. It's also a good idea to check the wear items, pads, rotors, shoes, and drums, to make sure there is plenty of life left. It's better to find and fix now than to have surprises later. Don't forget about the windshield wipers and washer fluid. Since freezing isn't an issue in summer, some people trade the traditional blue formulation for one that contains rain-shedding additives or detergents that help to fight the buildup of dead bugs. Whatever formula you choose, make sure it's full and the nozzles are spraying properly. Next, take a good look at the oil in the transmission, transfer case, and differential housings. Make sure it's clean and at the proper level. If it's dirty or smells burned, or it shows signs of water contamination, change it. If you have an automatic transmission, you should follow the manufacturer's recommendation regarding transmission fluid changes. But otherwise, it's a good idea to change the oil in manual transmissions, transfer cases, and differentials at least once a year. If it's been a while, this would be a good time to change everything and start fresh. Make sure to use the correct type of fluid, and don't forget to check and/or change the oil in the swivel housings if your vehicle has them. While you're underneath, check the drive shaft, suspension, and steering components for wear or damage. Grab each part and give it a firm shake while looking for abnormal movement. Replace anything that's worn, bent, or broken, and give a few pumps of the grease gun to every grease fitting. If you're one of those people who have a separate set of tires just for winter use, it's time to take those off and put on the summer tires. If not, you should probably rotate the tires you do have. Either way, you should check the air pressure and adjust if necessary. You should also give each tire a thorough inspection, looking for cuts or bruises from potholes and other road hazards, and abnormal wear that could indicate worn parts in the steering or suspension. Remember, you should always tighten the lug nuts by hand, not with an impact gun, and use a torque wrench to make sure they're tightened equally and to the proper tension. Winter dirt has a lot of corrosive salt in it, so this would be a good time to give your ride a good spring cleaning inside and out. I prefer to hand wash because it is easier on the finish, plus it gives me a chance to carefully examine every inch of the paintwork, and if I can find any flaws, I can fix them before they get worse. If you go to a commercial machine wash facility, spend a few extra dollars for the optional undercarriage wash. Removing the salt and excess mud from under the vehicle will greatly extend its life, Plus, it makes working underneath your ride a much more pleasant experience. Cleaning the carpets and upholstery and giving the dash and other surfaces a quick wipe down will also make your drive time more enjoyable. Many people enjoy working on their vehicles almost as much as driving. For them, all this work will make a fun afternoon project. It's not difficult work, but if you really don't enjoy it, my advice is to hire a professional who specializes in your vehicle. Spend a little money now and rest assured that your favorite ride will be ready to spring forward into a great summer full of fun activities.
We now have joining us another special guest, Jeff Aronson. He's the editor of Rovers magazine, which is a publication of Rovers North, a supplier of parts to North America and I assume worldwide if you really wanted to buy from Rovers North. And this happened very fortuitously. Jeff attended the recent Discovery Vision Concepts announcement in New York City, and he was nice enough to join us for this podcast. So it's worked out perfectly. He was there. We're going to talk about it. So what are we talking about? The Discovery Vision Concept was a debut at the New York Auto Show aboard the USS Intrepid for the new family of Land Rover vehicles known as Discovery. So apparently Discovery is becoming a family of vehicles, just like Range Rover has become a family of vehicles. And they announced this concept with a truck that was debuted, and I guess it's supposed to give us cues to what could possibly be coming as far as the look and feel and some of the technology. You may have heard one neat little technology thing they had put out that even friends who aren't Land Rover people, but they made sure I knew about it because they said, "Did you see this?" Which is the invisible bonnet. And so I heard from everybody about the invisible bonnet, which has cameras in the wheel wells, such that as you're coming up over a hill, then they project that image that's from under the wheel wells onto the windscreen, which then makes the bonnet look like it's invisible. That's at least that's that technology. There's a bunch of other technologies. So, Jeff, you were there. What can we have here? Your take and what happened, and what you think?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Dave, and others who are at the podcast headquarters.
It's a headquarters now.
Land Rover has to compete in a very, very challenging environment that for Land Rover enthusiasts seems self-evident, but in actuality is extraordinarily difficult. And I say that because to a Land Rover enthusiast, of course, Land Rover is the central focus as an automotive manufacturer, vehicle manufacturer. We live with them, we use them, we keep track of the breadth of the Land Rover model lineup. What's the statement? We bleed green. But for most of their customer base, Land Rover can be interchangeable with a host of other 4x4 vehicles, or in the case of the Range Rover lineup, certainly the luxury vehicles. And I continue to tip my cap annually to what Land Rover North America manages to achieve in terms of grabbing attention. And they really do work very closely with Land Rover UK in making this happen. Of great interest, of course, to enthusiasts, particularly Discovery owners, is the fact that the Discovery name, which had kind of been banished from the U.S. market, starting with the LR3, the changeover from the Freelander to the LR2 name with that new model, and then, of course, the LR4. The Discovery name continued as a very viable model name for the rest of the world, but not in the U.S. And the fact that Land Rover chose to, quote, launch this concept model really implies strongly that the Discovery name will return to the U.S. For Discovery enthusiasts, that's great news because we're not trying to pretend that it's something other. It's a Discovery, and we're happy to see it. Now, having said that, Land Rover indeed needed to have an attention-grabbing way to introduce this vehicle to several hundred people between their very clever launch that you just referred to and the auto show's coverage itself, but also to a worldwide audience because this was a two-part global launch event. The first part, indeed, was the Discovery 5 concept. There are lots of elements in that concept that struck me and that would strike enthusiasts as more or less signifying that Jerry McGovern is very much the chief designer for Land Rover. Because if you remember, McGovern worked for MG for a while when it was an independent entity. He worked for Ford when Ford bought Land Rover. He actually helped design the current Ford Explorer ideas, as well as the Lincoln. And when Ford didn't do anything with his designs, they sent him back to Land Rover, and out came the Range Rover Evoque, which, as you still know, Land Rover can't make enough of. So there's elements of his design that seem to work from a stylist's perspective. That being said, a lot of folks at the auto show, including even a few folks at Land Rover North America, looked at it and said, my Ford Explorer looks similar to that.
Yep.
Particularly from the rear. The built-in spoiler, the bulbous rear end, the horizontal taillights, those are very much part of the Ford Explorer current design. What it does say is that, like Chris Bangle at BMW and later at VW, McGovern has some styling cues that he thinks are just the goods, and we'll probably see them on concept vehicles for a while. I don't predict that we'll see them in the U.S. market the same way we saw that concept car. The other major feature of the concept vehicle was that it included clap doors, suicide doors, so that they electronically could open and you could see the interior unimpeded by what's likely to be the very necessary doorpost that will come back. Inside the vehicle, it's a true 2 seats up front, 2 or 3 in the middle, and then 2 in the rear, with the stadium seating in the rear still present. The seats themselves not on tracks built up from the unibody, but on tracks built into the unibody. So like you would see at some sort of fancy theater or upscale movie theater, the seats literally slide forward on tracks built in to the structure of the car. So when the doors open, the seats folded flat, then move forward. When they fold flat, some of them form sort of end tables and consoles with built-in holders and the like. And they can be arranged in any way you wish them. You can have limousine-type seating with the center seats down for tables, or you can have conventional seating, and very comfortable, I might add, for anyone who has to clamber into the back. It's not quite as painful as it is in some 7 or 9 seat vehicles. The efforts are made to brighten up the interior in terms of making the colors and the lighting inside the vehicle brighter. Panoramic roof assures that there's a lot of translucent light coming through. And John, just as you were alluding to with that transparent bonnet, there are other touch controls and or hand gesture controls that are built into the vehicle. They seem to perhaps the diehard enthusiast to be frill and frippery. And I certainly could do without them. I have no interest in them myself. However, when you were at the auto show, you realized that a number of manufacturers of entry-level cars included are putting them in their vehicles. So these are things that are related to how we operate a smartphone or a tablet. The hand motion, the swoop, the swish will become part of how you control elements of the vehicle's interior, from door locks to windows. Again, for the off-road enthusiast, it may not be necessary, but it is expected, and that was the point we heard from Land Rover at a design and technical seminar the following day after the big launch. I'll come back to the launch in a second. That a lot of the features that are included now are forward-thinking, because the belief is that the marketplace for new vehicles will expect to have all these. Land Rover announced a partnership with Intel and Apple that they're setting up in Portland, Oregon, and that is really sort of an apps and software center, so that Land Rover can be at the forefront with those producers of software. to make certain that whatever is coming forward that might have an application to a vehicle actually will work with the vehicle and work effectively. Let me go back to the launch because it was so much fun. As some of your listeners won't know, I live on an island of about 1,000 people off the coast of Maine. So for me to go to New York City at all was a very big deal. For me to find the tie that I own and the sport jacket that is still presentable and all was equally so. But there in New York, I was invited to join a few hundred people aboard the deck of the Intrepid on the Hudson River. It was the kind of evening that Land Rover could only pray for, but their prayers were answered. It was clear, it was cool but comfortable. The lights off the Hudson were fabulous. Moored beside the Intrepid was what I first thought was a cruise ship called the Topaz, but it turns out it wasn't. It's actually a ship owned by a member of the Saudi royal family who happened to be in New York at that time. It looked the same length to me as the Intrepid. That being said, probably wasn't. That being said, we boarded the Intrepid, and you walked through the wonderful Air and Space Museum that's a part of the exhibits below, and you were ushered out to one of the side decks, sort of a forecastle deck off the flight deck. There were light towers and sound towers at an extraordinary expense, undoubtedly, that started to illuminate and boom at the right moments and produce the sort of rush of sound. And there against the superstructure of the ship came a light show announcing a new age of discovery. That's the tagline. And from every aircraft carrier has a type of freight elevator that elevates the planes onto the flight deck, so they get stored below. And on the elevator came this enormous cloth cocoon, like a Buckminster Fuller dome, illuminated with a bright white. And off to its left was a spotlight on what looked to be a small space shuttle. The cocoon opens, and there is the Discovery 5 concept car with Jerry McGovern in front, speaking across the Hudson, if you will, in a plummy accent, highlighting what he thought the main features of this new concept car were and its main advantages. He also announced that Land Rover has signed an agreement as a partner with Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson's space company, which has a spaceport in New Mexico and plans next year to begin flights right to the edge of the atmosphere and allow those with somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple of $100,000 to take a flight to the edge of our atmosphere and space, and you will be brought to the spaceport in a Land Rover provided for Virgin Galactic. The chief test pilot of Virgin Galactic was there, made a brief presentation, as were a number of Land Rover officials from the UK, from Phil Popham to some of Jerry McGovern's design team who were responsible for different elements of the vehicle. It was quite an extraordinary 15 minutes of unveiling, and then we were asked to wait in line as members of the press, where we would be allowed to get near the vehicle, take our photos, etc. The general reaction amongst a great number of Range Rover and Land Rover enthusiasts who were present, and those are largely people who have purchased new vehicles, was very positive. They liked its lines, they liked its sleekness. They did not mind that some of the design cues of the LR4 that really do link it with the first discoveries have largely been taken away, with just the remnants of the Alpine window and the stadium seating, the clamshell hood present. But that being said, for those individuals who are purchasers of newer Range Rover LR4 type product, it was an exciting it was exciting to them. It will be interesting to see how much of it actually stays with the Discovery that comes here. We were also told, I was told by Land Rover North American officials, that in effect the first the next Discovery we're going to see is a sort of Discovery Sport, so a smaller, slightly smaller version, like the Range Rover Sport relative to the new Range Rover. The Discovery Sport will be a slightly different styled version, more road-oriented, of the current LR4 model.
Does that replace the Freelander LR2?
No, it does not. The LR2 is due for a redesign, but the LR2 in Europe remains a strong seller for Land Rover. So in terms of bringing something to the U.S., I think the effort is to gain attention to the Discovery lineup. And just as the Range Rover Sport brought a new type of Range Rover owner into the Land Rover family, it's anticipated the Discovery Sport will do the same.
Does that mean it's based on a Freelander platform, much like the Range Rover Sport was based on the Discovery platform?
Good question, and can't give you an answer. I'm going to guess not, because the current LR2 platform, I think, will go by the wayside as its successor model comes forward.
Actually, it'll have to, because the existing LR2 platform is actually a Volvo platform, which Ford no longer owns.
It was shared with that Volvo when Ford had a combined, what do they call it, the Prestige Group, I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Premier.
Premier, thank you.
Yeah,
right.
It was the S6. It's the Volvo S60, isn't it?
I think
right.
So.
Yeah, which I think they're changing that too.
Right, but Ford owns neither of the companies now, so there's absolutely no tie between Volvo and Land Rover.
Right. So, big question, Jeff, for us, because we're big Defender fans. Thoughts on, did they talk anything at all about the new Defender?
Well, it's interesting, guys, that it was almost a relief for me to attend the following day's what's called Design and Technical Seminar. They brought Jerry McGovern in, and they brought a Dr. Wolfgang Eppel. He apparently is the chief technology person for Land Rover. So in terms of engineering, it falls into his bailiwick.
A German in charge of engineering. Imagine that.
Yes, how strange, right? The big pitch early on, and one of John, I think you used this language before, which was telling, was that indeed Land Rover wants to create three distinctive but connected families of vehicles, each with a different set of purposes. And I'm sort of looking at my notes here that I madly took as all this was presented. The intent, without question, is that the Range Rover lineup, while it will share all of the off-road capabilities that we would want to have, its focus will be around refinement. The focus for the Discovery lineup is to be versatility. The focus for the Defender lineup, which was clearly identified as a lineup, is going to be durability. I met up with the global PR director for Land Rover, Gabby Whitefield, who came over to the U.S., and asked her, I told him, our readers really care enormously about the Defender. What can I tell them about what's proposed? And she said, you can tell them that it's, quote, it's going to be kick-ass rugged, unquote. So I said, that. Can I quote you? And she said, yes. So that very afternoon on the Rovers North blog that I blogged from the show, as well as on the Rovers North and Rovers Magazine Facebook page, I quoted her directly. It is really talked about as a lineup of vehicles. I think what we have to remember as enthusiasts is that Land Rover has limited capability financially and in terms of manufacturing to produce wholesale lineups of vehicles. They really they feed us drips and drabs, and sometimes the relationship of the vehicles only becomes apparent after the fact. In this case, they were really quite adamant that each of the families will have a distinct set of purposes and a focus. Of course, that's just language. What really counts is what happens in the end. It was a little disconcerting to me to notice that absolutely nobody asked to open the bonnet to see if there was an engine in that Discovery concept car.
That's interesting.
Again, from a reassurance perspective, at the actual press days of the auto show itself, chatting with Skip Pavlik, who's the product manager in the U.S. for the LR Series 2 and 4, as well as for the Evoque, when I said, hey, that's the supercharged V6 underneath that bonnet. Can we look at it? He was the only one, to pop the hood, and we pulled off that ugly engine cover to really take a look at that enormous and beautiful-looking supercharger in there.
Is there going to be a U.S. spec disco then? Is that what I'm hearing?
What do you mean by U.S. spec disco?
So the concept, I understand that not all these things may make it into the final product, but it almost sounded, with this family, there may be one that is special for the United States versus being different. So the European spec would have X, Y, and Z on it, and the American one might have W, Y, and not Z. I'm not sure if I'm making that clear.
No, you are, John, and your point's well taken. That already exists to some degree because the petrol engines, the gas engines, largely wind up in the U.S., maybe the Middle East markets. That's about it. Most everything else, of course, has gone diesel. So we're already, in a way, we have models aimed at us. We know that Land Rover has to change models for different markets because of multiple requirements. The EU safety requirements are different than the U.S. safety requirements. They still have to make right-hand drive ones and so on for the British market, the Japanese market, and the like. So it's already there. There's no question that the largest market for the Range Rover is the United States, and the Range Rover Sport is almost exclusively winding up in the U.S. They can't make very many of them, and every dealer in the United States will tell you they can't get enough of them.
Just happened to see Fifth Gear played in the United States here on Velocity, and they just did a review of the Range Rover Sport. Guy fell in love with it. He's that younger guy on the show. He absolutely fell in love with the Range Rover Sport.
Well, there is nothing sexier than a supercharged V8 with double overhead cams.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider that same vehicle that will allow a state trooper to chase you for some distance and from some distance behind.
Make them work for it.
Yeah, make them work for it. Will also, provided you put tires on it, will also crawl at 2 miles an hour up and down anything you can put in front of it.
You should see,
which the state trooper cannot do, by the way.
Well, they're now, a lot of cops now are moving over to Ford Explorers. Oddly enough,
say again,
that's the police pursuit vehicle of choice now. Interestingly enough, on that Fifth Gear episode, they drove the Range Rover Sport through a 747 that had been modified to have off camber and seesaw effects. And he drove that. He was amazed. He drove it up to this 747, and there was a Defender sitting off to the side that he was inches away from. I can only imagine how easier it would have been with cameras. But
I think that without question, there's no reason that Land Rover would not recognize that they have a niche in a high-performance SUV. They're the ones doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they so there's no reason to think that they wouldn't want to create a discovery for that. But at the same time, I think the purpose behind it is to draw people who look at the LR4, the current LR4, and say, that looks either too big or too boxy for me. I'd like something sleeker. And just like the Range Rover Sport also allowed a nice price differential, I'm predicting the Discovery Sport might do the same. And Dave, to your point, what it might do is answer the question for the LR2 buyer of why should I pay a premium price, if you will, for what is essentially a car that has heavy competition at lower prices within the U.S. market.
Well, at the reveal event, Jeff,
yes.
Were they able to actually kick on the heads-up display and show you anything with the invisible bonnet? Or
No, nothing was done except a recreation through a video presentation.
I mean, it's pretty spectacular, the video that I've seen.
Well, the one, this is something, it is spectacular. It was wonderful to see. The neat part about a lot of that 2-hour design and technical seminar that I joined a lot of other automotive journalists at, They did two of them. It was so well attended that they had to do two in order to get everybody in. But the interesting part of it is that all of the applications that as a Series 2A owner I might just go pshaw about, all of them were focused around off-road capability or need. So, for example, there was one that folks who are far more tech savvy than I or tech interested than I really glommed on. Now, I need to preface all this, guys. I live on an island where it's almost impossible to use a cell phone because we don't have good cell phone coverage. So my cell phone itself is reminiscent of the first BlackBerry because it's the only thing that works out here. Smartphones, with all of their wondrous features, are simply almost impossible to use on the island. People who have them wait until they get to the mainland to actually use them. That being said, in the rest of the world, that's pretty common, and the expectation is that if I can do it on my smartphone, why can't my vehicle do it too? So there's a feature proposed within this concept vehicle that would allow you to drive your car up, say, on a green lane, to a fence gate. You normally would have to put the car in park or in neutral with a handbrake, step out of the vehicle, open the gate, return to your vehicle, move it forward, stop it again, close the gate. Since the electronic communication now allows such close control of so much, you too can probably change the thermostat in your home wherever you are through those type of communication skills. There's no reason that the vehicle couldn't do the same. And they actually showed an app at work off just somebody's small tablet, like a Galaxy or even an iPad, which would allow you to, when the vehicle's in low range, to move the vehicle forward and actually steer it remotely. So it's called autonomous driving, not hands-free, but autonomous driving. And so you step out of the vehicle, you open the gate, you signal to the vehicle to move forward, you steer the vehicle through the gate, you shut the gate, you get back in the vehicle. It may seem like froth to a diehard enthusiast, but vehicles are now going to come with this regardless of their price range. So its absence would be a hindrance to Land Rover, not a help. The neat thing is when they talked about something like this, even though I can certainly see that Land Rover could do the same thing so that people who are too lazy to learn how to parallel park an automobile could do it remotely, the fact is they chose to make this presentation not in terms of what you can do at the shopping mall, but what you could do off-road. And if there was anything refreshing about all 4 days that I spent around Land Rover at the auto show, it's that while the terms of refinement and versatility and certainly a lot of luxury fitments around the vehicles were emphasized, at all times the language around the vehicle and its presentation was also around its off-road capability. However they achieve it, it remains central to how Land Rover presents itself to the world and how it sees itself internally. I also want to just put a note in here that I don't think gets enough credence. The folks who work at Land Rover UK are far greater enthusiasts than I think we sometimes give them credit for. Person after person that I met with the kind of titles that indicate that they are certainly up in the hierarchy had to pull out their phone to show me their early discovery, their Range Rover Classic, their Series Land Rover, their Defenders that they have at home. So even though they are dealing today in a much more contemporary and perhaps more refined and luxurious vehicle, it doesn't mean that they don't recognize the connection and indeed revel in the connection with their earlier cars.
It's certainly good to hear.
If this were any other company, when people showed you pictures like that, the response would be, well, is that the best that corporate can give you?
They are hugely proud of their heritage Land Rovers and Land Rover's heritage. Here's one for enthusiasts to get wired about. The fellow who's in charge of special events for Land Rover North America is named Bob Burns. And again, enthusiasts may recognize his name from his decades with the earliest days of Land Rover North America, with Land Rover Experience training. Bob has said that Land Rover North America is seeking to recreate and refurbish a Great Divide Range Rover. They want to redo the Great Divide Expedition.
We know somebody that has one.
Oh, good, because they're looking for both photos and parts. But Bob,
we'll have to track down.
If you can track, that would be great, John. But this is the sort of thing that says that there's still some, in the midst of all the refinement, that there is some great off-road hardcore entertainment that Land Rover officials like to have. And as long as they keep talking that way and showing evidence of producing that, I think we're in good hands. We need to sometimes remember that the marketplace for new vehicles is different than what we might choose to have. On the other hand, so many Land Rover enthusiasts do have a contemporary modern vehicle for commuting use, for family use, for other purposes. So we shouldn't be surprised that Land Rover has to produce those vehicles as well.
Was there one of the things I've been focusing on was there any discussion about autonomous vehicles, not what you were talking about with that special feature that you could drive the vehicle from the outside, but I'm talking about truly autonomous vehicles. Are they concerned about that, worried about that, planning on it?
Undoubtedly, they're planning, depending on which way the market goes. But the interesting part that Dr. Appel mentioned during the seminar was to remind everybody he genuinely, and he believes that Land Rover owners really like to drive. They don't have a particular interest in being in some sort of pod that is controlled by computer screens and so on.
Everybody's just giving the thumbs up, by the way, to that comment. That was good to hear.
Damn straight.
We're all happy to hear that.
So there will be, adaptive cruise control and the like. They're already on the vehicles. There's no reason that you can't use those sensors that are on the vehicles to avoid accidents. You certainly can recognize that they can give you alerts and warnings of what's going on around you. And yes, if carried to their extreme, they can clearly control the vehicle from afar.
Do you think that would be able to stop you from hitting a Ford Focus when it's bright and sunny in front of you? Sorry, I had to take a shot at our fellow panelists.
It was an escape.
Escape.
Apparently you didn't.
I might have done
it actually would. It actually would. Right now, Toyotas have cruise control that will slow you down if you get too close to the car in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I think Mercedes does that too. Yeah.
Lots of people do it, and even though, for me, cruise control means the hand throttle on the 2A.
Right.
It's however extraneous it might seem to me. I don't represent for Land Rover a big part of future new car sales.
Yeah.
My cruise control is a brick, by the way.
Yeah. So, that was my autonomous question. So I guess they're thinking about it. It sounds like they're going to be on the back edge of that, which is good to hear because I still like to drive myself. Although it would be good when I drink too much at the bar. That would be nice to get in the vehicle and hit home, and it takes me home.
Not that John would ever do such a thing.
I do not do that.
But I think the intent from Land Rover is they don't see that as necessarily the market for their vehicles. Why would you, in effect, want to have a vehicle with such superb driving capabilities that you don't drive?
Amen.
People own stuff they don't use, so I guess it's possible. It's true.
It is, Dave. They'd be foolish to ignore it, but at no time was it part of any of the presentations they made.
Okay. The Virgin Galactic, is there any other tie-in besides this? Do you think that anything else will come of that besides the driving to the space plane?
Well, it's a fair question. My belief, it was strange to me. If you follow marketing in the U.S., Virgin Galactic has been almost silent for the past several years.
Yes.
Frankly, if it weren't for the very, very stunning models who are standing beside the space shuttle, and a photo of them, I believe, is in the next issue of Rovers magazine when the article appears.
Nice plug.
Well, I took it. I couldn't resist it. I could not understand quite what the connection was. My belief is that the Richard Branson branding is what Land Rover wanted to tie in with. He is Donald Trump without the bankruptcies. So he's a great marketer of himself.
And with better hair.
Much better hair.
Yes.
And also, frankly, less foolishness. Whatever he has created, certainly in Europe, has succeeded wondrously, if less so here. That being said, remember it was a global launch, so I believe that it will carry a greater cachet outside. I think what they want to do is to identify that Land Rover may have produced wondrous vintage vehicles, but that Land Rover is at a cutting edge. And there are different ways you can identify cutting edge. One is through style, one is through, if you will, fashion, but another one is through sheer engineering. And perhaps the most exciting engineering that's out right now in front of us will either involve what could happen with space travel or top of the Earth's atmosphere travel, and internet or computerized communication technologies. Land Rover wants to be in both and see what happens with it. I think it's a very clever way to distinguish Land Rover.
What about electric vehicles? One of the things I'm always interested in are full electric vehicles. We've seen the electric Defender. Was there any discussion about that at this event?
Not at the event itself, but I pressed in questions about this, different Land Rover officials. It's likely that as a way to create greater efficiency in vehicles, they're certainly looking at a variety of hybrid options, whether it's diesel and electric together, whether it's plug-in electric for certain features of the vehicle. They're looking at improving combustion technology, transmission efficiency, driveline efficiencies, and they are looking at all times to reduce what they call parasitic losses, whether it's rolling resistance, problems with aerodynamic, and so on. I know that Land Rover North America officials recognize that the diesel has to come into the U.S. market in some manner, or they'll never reach a CAFE standard. But it may not be the diesel as it's been seen in Europe, where in effect the diesel is the sole propulsion, but it may be a combination of something produced in some of the Land Rover lineup.
So do you think then diesels will make their return back to North America?
Well, I think it's inevitable, and I say that also because it's pretty clear that the European and American diesel standards are moving towards each other, as opposed to a few years ago away from each other.
Right.
Now, for Land Rover, being such a small manufacturer, it will be interesting to see when they bring the diesel in. And I say this for two reasons to me. One is they really do need proof that the luxury market, which is, the main portion of Land Rover sales in the U.S., cares about diesels enough. Right now, it doesn't care. A smaller and whatever the LR2 becomes might be the perfect vehicle for a diesel.
Or the kick-ass rugged.
For the kick-ass rugged would be awesome for a diesel, absolutely.
I think that needs to be a T-shirt at least, if nothing else.
I'm waiting to hear from Gabby because she promised to stay in touch. When she does, I will ask for that T-shirt lineup.
We have a podcast name too. We're going to call it Kick-Ass Rugged. I already wrote it down.
Love it. So I think that yes, we're going to see a combination. They're certainly looking at them. I think the great push will be how do we stay in the U.S. market and meet CAFE standards without options of that sort.
I've just been pondering on this whole time the idea of hand gestures and such in an off-road vehicle. With some of the people I've had in mind with me off-roading, I can just imagine my doors unlocking, windows going up and down, the car turning off.
Are you talking about me?
No, not at all. Yes.
I sometimes make gestures while I'm in the vehicle. That is true.
Really?
Hey, so you got to get people's attention sometime. I can't see through the bonnet, so I hit things like rocks and.
I think that should be a project for us. A heads-up display, bonnet transparency.
We get a nice flat window in the Defender.
Yeah,
we could do that.
It's definitely doable. I'd like to take that on.
Well, we look forward to your reports, Mark.
Here in some of these displays is only that as the glass becomes ever more complicated from its sheer function of defrosting itself, of preventing, of being part of the safety system, and now having to have the resolution of a superb tablet, replacing a windshield is going to become a very expensive venture.
I went through 4 of them in my Freelander 1, and that was just a heated windscreen. So I can imagine, yes.
I think you'll get to the point where replacing the windshield means throwing the truck away.
Just because it'll be integrated?
Because it'll cost so much. It'll cost more than the value of the vehicle at some point.
Well, I just had some friends in Pennsylvania had bought a 2014 Range Rover Sport. It spun on a total icy road and gave itself a good thunk. And while the damage was largely to the doors, it is now repaired, painted up, and so on. It was $14,000 worth of damage. And that's just, it was just, I think, to one door, plus maybe a panel in front.
Yeah.
So there's no question they all cost a lot more to repair these days.
Well, you may also see the windscreen itself go away. It might just be a video display panel, and then you wouldn't even need glass. You would just have display.
Very possible.
Harold's rolling his eyes.
But in effect, that's the panoramic roof right now. One of the features of the Discovery concept vehicle was that you could actually create a sort of landscape. Let's say it's a gloomy day like it is here. You got clouds rolling over. It's probably going to rain tonight. On my panoramic roof, I might decide I want to see sunshine. And therefore, like a screensaver, there comes the sunshine.
Happy to hear that Land Rover is really still pushing the technological envelope on this, especially on the off-road technologies. Because that's always been my concern is other companies come out with flashy new concept vehicles, but none of them seem to be pushing the envelope anywhere else in terms of their normal functionality. And to us Land Rover enthusiasts, normal functionality, that's our off-road.
That's well put, Morgan, and I share your reassurance. It was very refreshing to hear in the presentation that wasn't to a group. Most everybody at the seminar, most of the folks there, they might be interested in off-road, but they weren't off-road magazines for the most part. It was, Auto Week, Con Driver, Gene Jennings was there from Automobile Magazine, and so on. So it was very much a group of general automotive enthusiasts. So for Land Rover to keep reminding everybody that within that Land Rover DNA is off-roading and exploration, very much a part of what that link with Virgin Galactic means in space, but also what it means for earthbound Land Rovers.
Jeff, did they say anything about how they're going to address ruggedizing the electronics?
No, but Dave, the one thing I guess that I just always remember, I have a friend through Land Rover circles who spent a good part of his professional life as an aviation mechanic for Delta Airlines. He lives down in Connecticut, and he's now in another field, but he did that for a long time. Every time I would raise the issue of electronics, my skepticism with electronics, he would remind me that for the millions of miles that an airplane travels each year, they rely completely on their ability to design, engineer, and then maintain electronic controls for something as vital as keeping the plane in the air, and it's supposed to be. So I guess the challenge will then be to Land Rover at its production engineering side. How do we take this great idea and make sure that we can insulate everything from the sensors to the wires, et cetera, to the computers, so that they are impervious to weather? It'll be the great challenge, but it doesn't seem to be daunting to them at all.
The last question for you, just because I'm looking at the list of things that came out, was what are laser headlights?
Laser headlights will allow you to look ahead, much as night goggles do.
Okay, so it's part of that. It's part of their laser terrain scanning.
Yes. So,
Okay.
in other words, beyond the reach of your LED headlamps, there might be a tree down in the road or a deer standing in the middle of the road. The laser lamp has the opportunity to signal that before the headlight does.
Do you think they'll be able to provide that in my Series 3? Will they be able to retrofit it? I could use that in the Series 3.
Well, I could use it for some of my off-roading, that's for sure.
Can the output of the laser headlamps be turned up a bit so as to blast the deer off the road?
Hey, there you go.
Or start cooking it right away.
That's it. Jeff, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We're going to bring this to a close. You have some things I know to do, and so do we, and we've talked for a good while. So hopefully, if you like us enough, maybe you'll join us again, and we'll talk more about how you got into Land Rovers and what you do for Rovers Magazine.
I would have a wonderful time doing just that, and I hope I can be invited back as a guest at any time it works for you guys.
Absolutely.
Terrific idea.
Thank you. We're small. It's just us. I think we only have 25 subscribers, which are probably all my friends and family. But hey, it's a start. And we're only doing this because we enjoy talking about Land Rovers, as you've noticed. And we, again, really appreciate talking to us. Appreciate Steve Bland from the UK from joining us. He had to drop early. And we'll hopefully hear about his adventures as he goes to the Arctic Circle. Yes, he's going to the Arctic Circle. I still think that's interesting.
That's spectacular.
It is, isn't it? I don't know. It's cool.
Wonder if they give away bumper stickers once you get there.
I went to the Arctic Circle, and all I got was this crappy T-shirt.
Bumper sticker.
Someone needs to open up a tourist trap shop there.
We need to call Dana and get him to print one and send it to Steve.
Send it to Steve. Maybe we'll do that. We'll do that.
I was just going to say, I think this launch event, I'm impressed with just how much material was presented at the one event. Normally, these things, you have to sit through an hour or two of sales hype, and then that's pretty much it. But this, the amount and the breadth of the types of things that were presented and the number of different people they had involved is impressive, definitely.
It was genuinely work. I have a notebook full of notes from the quality of that presentation and from the discussions I had with Land Rover folks. And so you're absolutely right. This was a seminar, and it was somewhat of a course of what Land Rover's looking ahead to do. They presented it well and with great detail.
How many articles are we going to get in Rovers Magazine now?
With the issue, there's an issue at the printer right now, so it'll be in our midsummer issue. That's the next one, and this could be the cover story. It's certainly going to be a big one.
It is. Well, Jeff, we will have you back anytime, and so we'll next time we'll learn more about you. I think that would be interesting. That was my original intent, was to find out how you got into Land Rovers, and I certainly follow your adventures on Facebook.
Well, thank you, John. And yes, I'd be delighted to join you at any time. Just drop me a note and let me know when you want to do the next one.
Absolutely. Well,
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, that closes the 13th episode of the Centresteer podcast. If you have any comments, questions, or maybe you want to join us on the podcast, go out to our website, centresteer.com. That's spelled in the British way, R-E. And there's a contacts page. Maybe Morgan will set up an actual email address to let people know about, and so people can email directly. We also have a Twitter account, which is centresteer.com. And no, it isn't. It's just Centresteer. It's at Centresteer if you want to tweet me, and I can get back to you that way. Thanks very much, and we will talk to you next month.
Hi, all. Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you.
Very much.
The Centresteer theme song, Sunset Rider by the Tritons, is available from Mibio's Music Alley. Check it out at music.mibio.com. I am having a beer because I think it's important.